I told Father Tran I was going to do this as a Titan parent. I got to put on my mom hat as I get to introduce Father Tran today. Father Augustin Tran was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and emigrated to the United States in 1974 with his parents. He grew up in Springfield, Illinois, and although he was baptized as a Catholic as an infant, he was not raised in a religious household, and he considered himself as an atheist for a time. He graduated and went on to graduate school in Georgia Tech. At Georgia Tech, he had a profound conversion, which changed his life, and he received the sacraments of initiation in 1991. He entered the seminary in 1993. He has been a devoted priest in the Archdiocese for 20 years, and we are blessed by his priesthood. And let's give him just a hand for that. So, Father Tran is now with us in residence for the past 9 years, and also he's the theology teacher at Blessed Trinity. Go Titans. Thank you, Father Tran.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Father asked me to share with you a little bit about my vocation story and how I came to be here. And I have the 10:30 Mass, so if you guys are going to the 10:30 Mass, you don't have to worry about us running a little bit late. If I'm not there, nothing's going to happen. So, as you heard in my story, I was baptized when I was an infant, but I didn't really grow up in a Catholic household. We didn't pray, we didn't go to church, we were kind of Christmas, Easter Catholics. And even after we came to America, it was even less so, practiced very little. And so I didn't really have much of an upbringing. And for my high school and college years, undergraduate years, I really did consider myself an atheist. I was one of these very scientifically minded people who just kind of thought if you couldn't see it, smell it, taste it, measure it somehow, then it doesn't exist. It's not real. And it wasn't until I got to graduate school at Georgia Tech. I was studying aerospace engineering there down here at Tech. And which is what my undergraduate degree was from University of Notre Dame. Yeah, I went to Notre Dame. I went to a Catholic high school. I went to Notre Dame, and during those 8 years, I considered myself an atheist. I didn't really believe any of it while I was in those places. But what happened when I came down to the South was people started to kind of question Catholicism and say things that just from being around Catholics for 8 years and being in Catholic school and having to take religion classes and theology classes, I guess I soaked in some of it, but people started to kind of ask questions about Catholicism, and I didn't really have the answers. And I didn't think some of the things that they were saying, why do you always worship Mary? Why do you think the Pope is better than everyone else? Why do you pray to saints? Right? This sort of stuff. It didn't sound like what I had heard Catholicism was about when I was studying it in my religion, my theology classes. And so it didn't sound right. And so really just out of intellectual curiosity, I started to study Catholicism just to see what it was like and just to see, of course I went to Notre Dame, and so I had all these friends who were Catholics, all these people that I thought were very intelligent who were Catholic, and I was trying to understand why would these really intelligent people, lawyers, doctors, engineers, why would they believe in God? It doesn't seem to make sense. And so I said, well, maybe I should at least know what it is that Catholics believe, what it is that they think, so if I'm going to reject it, I can reject it intelligently. And really, just out of intellectual curiosity, I started to read about Roman Catholicism. And I found out that it made a lot of sense, a lot more sense than I thought it would. It had what I called this internal coherency to it, which means that if you're willing to accept certain starting premises, I wasn't yet ready to accept the premises, God exists, the Bible is the Word of God, those things. If you're willing to accept those starting points, then everything else was very coherent and it all fit together really, really well. And I was surprised by that. I thought it was going to be a lot more illogical, right? And that's, common in science and engineering. You're not sure about these starting points, but you can see that if this is true, then all of this follows from it. And I at least saw that all this did follow. Everything else the church was teaching made a lot of rational sense. And I was, as I said, very surprised by that. and which kind of led to my conversion. Other things, it's too long a story. I don't have time to go into my whole conversion story. But in the middle of the conversion, as I was preparing to be confirmed, I started, one of the things that I realized was in order for me to understand Catholicism, I had to understand the Mass, because it seemed like it was the core and the center of everything. I kept reading as I was trying to understand the faith. I was trying to understand the Mass. And so I decided for the first time to go to Mass on my own. And it was actually the Sunday after Easter Sunday of 1991. So today's the anniversary of the first time I went to Mass myself. It was this Sunday. Now, back then it wasn't called Divine Mercy Sunday, right? We didn't get that until much later, until the 21st century. But it was a Sunday after Easter. I think that year at Georgia Tech, our spring break was either during Easter week or during Holy Week, and so there was no Mass at the Catholic Center on Easter Sunday. I tried to go Easter Sunday, actually, and there was no Mass, so I just went home. And then I came back the following Sunday, just out of curiosity. I just wanted to see what is this all about? And I didn't know the prayers. I didn't understand. It had been a long time since I've been to Mass. I didn't know when to sit and when to stand. I just kind of followed everybody else. But during that hour that I was there at Mass, I was totally at peace. And I was very calm, and I enjoyed being there. I didn't know any of the prayers, but I studied aerospace engineering for 6 years, and during that whole time, I had this perpetual headache. I was always kind of thinking about numbers, trying to solve equations, right? And I just had this headache all the time. And during this hour I was at Mass, I wasn't thinking about those things. I was at peace. I wasn't trying to solve problems. I didn't have a headache. And I really enjoyed it, so I said, well, I'll come back the following week. And I just kept coming back week after week and kind of studying and learning more and more and kind of falling in love with the Mass. And one Sunday, Father Mario, who was the chaplain there at Georgia Tech, he invited us to weekday Mass. He said, I'd like to invite you guys to come to Mass during the week. And this was the first time I heard about weekday Mass. I had no idea that people went to Mass during the week. I was like, that's what? I can't believe it. Isn't Sunday enough? I mean, you're already going for a whole hour on Sunday. Isn't it? People actually go to church during the week? That sounds silly. And then he really got me. Father Mario said, weekday Mass only takes 17 minutes. Father Mario, God love him, he said weekday Mass with a homily in 17 minutes every day. And so, of course, my engineering mind is going to work and it's saying, wait a second, it's impossible to squeeze all of this that we do into 17 minutes. How can you possibly do that? And so just out of curiosity, I had to go to see how he does this. And of course, those of you who go, there's no Gloria, there's no Creed, there's not a lot of singing, all this. So I didn't know that was what it would be like. And so he did it, he did the whole Mass in 17 minutes. But those 17 minutes, I was at peace. I enjoyed it. And so, and I started to go. And after a while, whenever I had time in my schedule, I would go to weekday Mass. And then after a couple of weeks, I started to plan my schedule around the Mass time so that I could go to Mass. I could be there for those 17 minutes during the week. And so I say all this because the main reason why we ordain, right? What is the priesthood? The priesthood is about offering sacrifice. This is what makes a priest, is that in any religion, a priest offers some form of sacrifice, right? The pagans offered sacrifices of animals or even of people to the gods, right? So priesthood is about offering sacrifice, and the Catholic priest offers the holy sacrifice of the Mass. This is central to what it is that we are ordained to do, besides hopefully the sacrifice of our life and other things like that we do. But it's about bringing the sacraments and offering that holy sacrifice of the Mass to the people. And so I was falling in love with the Mass, and I was falling in love with the liturgy, and so I got into the habit of praying the Rosary after Mass. And that was kind of funny. Also, I was when I had decided to come into the church, and that I was ready. The conversion, was kind of finished. The process was finished, and I was ready to. perhaps I should learn some Catholic prayers. And so I went to the Adoration Chapel there at Georgia Tech, and I sat down and I said, now, what would be a good Catholic prayer? What would be good Catholic prayers to learn? And sitting on the bench next to me are a set of rosary beads and this little pamphlet that says how to pray the rosary. And so I said to myself, I think the rosary is a Catholic prayer. I believe that's a Catholic. So I picked up the pamphlet. I didn't know the prayers. I followed along the pamphlet, and I'm, praying the beads. And I said, oh, I really like that. That was nice. I'll do that again tomorrow. And so I got in the habit of praying the daily rosary. And so then I got in the habit of praying the rosary after Mass. That was a nice meditation. And so one Sunday, after Mass, I'm praying the rosary. This is before I'm confirmed. I'm still in RCIA, still going through the process of confirmation before I'm confirmed. And I'm praying the rosary, and I think to myself, I would have given a different homily on that reading. So I have to admit, it was a very proud moment. There was a lot of pride there. I thought I could have done a better job than that priest on that reading. So I said, and then it's kind of hit me that what I was thinking about was becoming a priest. I said, well, that's ridiculous. No, there's no way. You're not even confirmed yet, right? Ever since I was a child, all I ever wanted was to be married and have my 2.1 children and 1.7, cars in the garage, my white picket fence, and just be Joe average like everybody else. So there's no way. It's ridiculous. What are you thinking about? Right? I hate public speaking, right? I couldn't get up in front of people and do that. You know nothing about theology. No way. Next time I'm praying a rosary after Mass, I would have given a different homily on that reading, right? It comes back, and I kind of keep thinking about it. It keeps coming back, and I keep pushing it out of my mind. And I read this article in the Georgia Bulletin written by somebody who's a priest now in the Archdiocese, about the 5 steps of discernment. And he said, it's just like you guys are all familiar with the 5 steps of grieving, right? And he said, it's the same thing. You go through that period of denial, right? Where you say to yourself, there's no way God is calling me to be a priest, right? I could never do that. I'm not holy enough. I'm not smart enough, right? I don't know anything about theology. I could never do that. So you go through that period of denial. And then you go through that period of bargaining with God where you say, look, I remember distinctly saying this, God, let me get married and have a family. I'll have 12 children and they'll all be priests and nuns. I promise you, right? You'll have so many more priests and nuns if you just let me, right, have my wife and my family and what I've wanted my whole life. So you go through that bargaining stage. And then you go through that anger stage, right? Where, why are you asking me to do this, right? Why not somebody else? I had everything planned out. I was going to be an engineer. I was going to do research. I was going to teach at university. I was going to have family, all this. And you have everything planned out, and you get so angry with God that he wants you to do something other than what you want to do. And you get through that depression stage where you're like, oh, I'm not going to have all those things that I wanted. I'm not going to have that family. I'm not going to have those children. I'm not going to be able to do those things that I wanted to do. And then you get to that acceptance stage where you say, well, you can only really be happy when you're doing God's will. And he knows better than me what's best for me. And so if I can just be willing to accept his will and take that leap of faith, I think ultimately I can be happiest doing that. And the thing is, you go through these stages every day over and over and over again, right? It's not like all at once, but it's just over and over. You keep going through it. And finally, what happened was that one morning I woke up, it's a Sunday, I was in the habit of going to Sunday evening Mass at the time. I woke up and it's this Sunday. I hadn't told anybody about this because I thought, people would think I'm crazy, especially my friends from college who, they kept asking me to go to Mass with them every Sunday, and I always said no because I just didn't want to go. And so I couldn't tell anybody I was thinking about this, but this is after my confirmation now, a couple months after my confirmation. And I wake up this one Sunday and I can't stop thinking about the priesthood and just can't get it out of my mind. I'm just thinking about it over and over and over again. And finally, I decide, well, I'll go to Mass early. I'll pray a rosary for Mass. I'll kind of pray about it, think about it. I go to Mass early, and I'm in there praying, and I see the RCA instructor, the one who gave me all my instruction, and he calls me over, and he says to me, he said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a priest?" And I said, no, not really. Why do you ask? Why do you think that, right? And he says, "Well, the vocations director for the Archdiocese is here this evening, and he's celebrating Mass, and I thought maybe you two could get together and talk and see what happens." So I go and I pray, and I'm praying before Mass, and the vocations director, he walks up to me, and he taps me on the shoulder. This was Monsignor Kenny. He taps me on the shoulder, and he says, "I was given your name. Would you like to go out to dinner?" And this was one of the things, Monsignor Kenny was a great vocations director, because he was very intuitive. He would just walk up to anyone and talk to them, be willing to talk to them about the priesthood. And so we have, that's why we have this call by name program now for that. So many people just don't feel like they've ever been asked. And he was willing to walk up to anybody and talk to them and ask them. And so we went out to dinner, and I said, after I tell him my whole story, and I've only been, confirmed for a few months, he'll realize I don't have a vocation to the priesthood, and then this will all be over. And so we have our dinner, and I tell him my whole story and the conversion and everything. And he says, "Well, I think you have a vocation to the priesthood." Right? And he says, "And I think that if you join our diocese, that we would probably send you to Rome to study for seminary. And so what do you think?" And I just thought he was nuts. And so he said, "Well, we have these vocations, holy hours, these vocations, masses. Why don't you come and join us for these things, and we can help you to discern." And so I did. And what Monsignor really kind of helped me to understand was that, at least for him, I know not all vocations directors think this way, but for him, and it really helped me in my discernment, he said, seminary is not the place you go when you've already decided you want to be a priest. It's the place you go to discern whether or not you want to be a priest, right? It's very difficult to discern from the outside. It's much easier when you're living the life of a priest and you're with other men who are discerning it to really figure out if this is what God is calling you to. And so I was sufficiently confused that I decided to enter the seminary based on what he said, right? That I felt I could discern better from the inside. And so I applied, and that was part of the process too. He said, you have to go through an application and a psychological eval and all of this. And so, you may not get accepted. That's part of the discernment to see whether or not you're really called, is whether the Archdiocese will accept you. And he said, one of the things that he always looked at was whether other people think you have a vocation. Have other people asked you that? And he said, numerous people had spoken to him and given him my name to talk to. So other people had kind of seen that, even if I didn't see it in myself at the time. And so he said, apply. I applied, and I was accepted. Actually, that year that I was accepted, 12 people applied, and only 2 of us were accepted. Myself and one other guy who went to Rome with us. Who went to Rome with me, or actually went the year before I did. And so I applied, I was accepted, and went through seminary. I took a pastoral years weren't mandatory at the time, but I took a pastoral year in the middle of it. I still wasn't positive. I took a year off to just work in a parish, and during that time, that really reinforced my vocation to work with the faithful and be with people and see what the priestly life is like in a parish. Really strengthened my vocation. I went back in the seminary and kind of finished out, and I was ordained finally in 1998. But part of that discernment, part of what I came to realize was, as I said before, really, only when you're doing God's will you truly be happy. Even if, we make our own plans for things, but it's usually when we do things our ways that things always go awry, right? When we're willing to give in to God's plan is what will ultimately make us happiest. And it was difficult telling my parents because they weren't really strong, as I had said, strong practicing Catholics at the time. I'd spent all this money to get this graduate degree, and my stepfather kind of said, I kind of feel like you're wasting all that money. You've wasted that degree. You've wasted all that time. And my mother was, I think, a very typical mother. She wants her son to be happy, and she thought that the life of a priest was too hard. It was too difficult, and it wouldn't be a happy life. And, I said at the time, it's 20 years later now, I said at the time when I used to tell this story back then, that, I think if in 20 years I'm a happy priest, that my mother will be very happy. And 20 years later, I'm a very happy priest. And so it took a while, and a lot of prayers for them, offered a lot of masses for them. But they now, I think, they've come back to the church. They're practicing now. They go to mass regularly every Sunday. And I think they are very happy for me and what I'm doing now. And so that's why I always encourage people, to pray for vocations. Archbishop Donahue kind of taught me this, that we often pray for vocations, but we don't always pray for them within our own families, right? From our own children, right? Or our own siblings. And I think that's important, that we be praying for those vocations from within our own family also. And that part of what I saw, and as you see now, I wanted all these children, and now look, right? I have hundreds of children that I have to take care of. I very much have a beautiful bride in the church, right, who takes care of me and who loves me. So all of that I wanted so much, I have so much more of it through this ministry, through this priesthood. And so I thank God for the vocation. It very, very much is a vocation, just like holy matrimony is. And that's something I always like to remind people too, is that matrimony is also a vocation, right? You guys have studied and talked about matrimony. I think sometimes people think that matrimony is the default, and maybe I'll get called to the priesthood. But we really have to discern whether God is calling me to holy matrimony also, and is he calling me to marry this person. There's a story I always tell my students. We had these nuns who came to Blessed Trinity to talk about vocation, and she told this beautiful story. They have these vocations weekends in the convent where young girls will come and they'll spend the weekend with them, they'll pray with them, they'll discern with them to help them discern. And usually the girls who come, they're very excited to be there. And she noticed this one girl who didn't seem to be very excited to be there at all and wasn't really participating very much. So she spoke to her and she said, why you don't seem to be enjoying yourself too much. Can you tell me what's going on? And she said, well, I really don't think that I'm called to the priesthood. I really don't think I'm called to religious life. I'm just I have this very serious boyfriend, and he told me that I should come to this weekend. There's a sermon weekend. I thought he was going to propose and we were going to get married, but instead he told me to think about whether I should be a nun, and I was kind of shocked. And so, but I decided to come. And so, so I'm here, but I'm not sure why I'm here. And so sister said, well, just give it a chance, pray, get involved. And so she does. And it's obvious by the end of the weekend, the sister said, it's obvious that she did not have a vocation to religious life, that she was called to marriage. But she leaves, and her boyfriend, her parents, they're there to pick her up, and they ask her, how did the weekend go? And she said, well, it was great. I really enjoyed it, but I just really don't think I'm called to priesthood. I think I'm called to holy matrimony. And the boyfriend said, well, I'm glad. And he got down on one knee and he proposed to her in that moment in the parking lot. So he just wanted to make sure that was really what she was called to, and that he wasn't taking her away from something else that God wanted her to do, right? Because he understood, right? If we love someone, we understand that if they follow God's will, that's what will make them happiest, not following our will, right? Not our will for our children or our will for the person that we love, but God's will for them is ultimately what will make them happiest. And the guy really understood that. So any of you young people out there, before you propose, right, make sure that you young men, make sure the girl has gone on a vocations retreat. Young ladies, before you say yes, make sure that you've gone on a vocations retreat. So thank you for your time. I see I've gone over by a little bit, but I have the next mass, so if you don't mind. God bless
you. Thank you, Father Tran. That was fantastic. I don't know how many of us have heard his conversion story before, but it is a beautiful, beautiful story, and we are so blessed by his 20 years in the priesthood. This is our table talk time, and Father Tran has come up with two very, very good questions for us to really ponder about. We know the value that priests add to our life on a daily basis and to our soul on a daily basis. So question number one is, what would the world be like without priests? Very deep question for us to think about. And question number two, how can you as a family work to foster vocations in your own family? yourself in your own family. So we're going to put 5 minutes on the clock and allow you to talk about that together. Again, a very, very big thank you to Father Augustin Tran for the humor and the beautiful story. We're grateful for him. And we're grateful for another man who's getting ready to celebrate 20 years as well. Father Jack, come on up.
Thank you. Yes, on June 19th, I'll be celebrating 20 years of priesthood. If you can believe that. 2 decades. Amazing. Don't have anything? I'm just supposed to talk? Okay, that sounds good. It's been so long since we were here, so now next week will be the last week, and we'll wrap up next week. But I thought, wasn't it beautiful what Father Tran had to tell us? I thought it was a great story. I've heard different versions of that story, and this one was particularly interesting. And you know what's also wonderful, because I said usually what disturbs him more than anything else if you're not precise. And so he asked me, it's like, well, what do you want me to do with this? I said, well, he hates it. He can't stand it. It's like, I said, well, at least I'm telling you, I want it in 21 minutes. And, but he wanted like, what is the kind of content you're looking for here? But I think what's important is, I was saying in each of the cases of the sacraments, it's not so much about describing the sacrament, it's describing how this sacrament has shaped your life and how the way God operates with the cooperation with that sign and that gift is always unique to each one of us. Because it's very interesting. He was talking about those 5 stages that you go through in discernment. I didn't have that. You can come up with whatever kind of standards you want to have. That's exactly not my experience. The Lord, when I prayed and He called me to be a priest, it just hit me that was what I was called to do. There wasn't any notion prior to the call of the Lord for me to become a priest of thinking about it. There was no struggle with it. So you see, for each person, you don't know when and how that's going to happen. You can look at it and say it's very usual and I think this is common in all vocational calls, it's very usual for us to have a plan that's beginning to take shape. We've reached a particular age, we're about ready to make some decisions. We've gotten a little bit of experience. We've gotten to where we can begin to control a few things, and we're moving in a particular direction. And our tendency is to say, I'm going to keep moving in that direction. And as a matter of fact, nobody's going to keep me from keeping along that direction. So for very many of us, there's a type of momentum, a type of direction that begins to take shape, a type of discernment. But what I think is very important and what Father was bringing up is that oftentimes that begins to become my will. It begins to become my version. And the question always is, are we actually moving away from God's will for us? Because what will happen is there will come a time where we're moving in that direction and we're blindsided, we're T-boned, we're whatever. There's going to be a detour. There's going to be all those unexpected things are the places where God breaks into our life. And when He breaks into our life, do we permit Him to redirect and shape that? And I think all of you in this room know what I'm talking about. There has been, if you look at some point, you may have had a very clear plan about what your life was going to be. Look at your life now. It's not that plan. It's not even close, okay? But where are the points where you, and if you haven't, I invite you to consider this. Have you really surrendered and abandoned yourself completely to God's will? That's always the question. So for me, it's less about those 5 stages and more each day about going like, yes, Lord, you've given me the ability to look towards the future and have these plans, but this is actually what I'm experiencing. How are you going to make that fruitful? This is the place where I am. This is the people around me. This is my vocation. How do you want me to live that now? And to begin to shed our notions and to begin to move in the motion and movement of the Holy Spirit and where the Lord wishes to leave us, which is mysterious, to take us, which is a mysterious unfolding of relationships, of activities, of interests, because what God's bringing forth in each one of us always, like for example, Father was saying, public speaking, I didn't want to do that. He's a great public speaker, okay? He actually teaches. His job is to speak publicly every day to a group of students, okay? So, and obviously to preach homilies and do these things. This is not something that within his parameters and skill set he thought he would be doing. But that's not how God operates. God says, well, that may not be in your parameter and skill, but you actually can do this. And it actually might frighten you. It might be something that's not comfortable for you, but this is something you will be able to do, and you will be able to do this effectively. I would say probably many of you would never think of me as being a shy person. Okay, most people say, well, Father is still convinced I'm a sanguine and I just like to hang out with people and everything. I actually, when I was younger, there was a lot, I was very shy in many situations. So there was a lot of shyness in my I could never have imagined myself being a teacher or imagine myself being a preacher. The idea of actually preaching a homily or celebrating Mass was an impossible notion for me when I was a child. It was never anything I ever imagined or anything that even ever appealed to me. It was interesting when they asked the question was like, what would your life be without priests? And I was sitting at a table with someone who had actually a life that was shaped in a very positive and wonderful way by priests. And I was thinking that when I grew up, I didn't have that notion of a priest. I didn't have that notion of gratitude for priesthood. And generally, I saw them as kind of unhappy, grouchy people who just happened to be the person I'd have to see celebrating Mass when we went to Mass every week. The notion of a celebrating Mass, just in celebration and Mass, did not combine in my mind in any sense or fashion when I was growing up in the beige 60s and 70s. But when I look back, and when I read something like, for those of you who may have read like Pope Benedict's letter that came out a couple weeks ago, when I look back, I think what's hard to see, and I think this is the same in marriages, is there has been such a cultural shift that it's been very hard to be a priest. It's been very hard to be a married person. And our culture has made that very difficult, part of it through our own decisions, but part of it just through the overall lack of morality, overall lack of direction. And so what I found is when I do look back, and I do look back at priests, I look back with a softer heart. I say, what these men must have gone through in those changes, the celebration of the Mass, not facing towards the people, this burden of having a good personality and engaging people in a way they weren't prepared to do. You had men living at first in like rectories with 5 other men, and then suddenly very few priests, and suddenly expecting to engage the people in a way that was not expected when they became priests. Does that make sense? And so what we see is that was very difficult for many of them. And that change, there were changes that occurred, many of which were necessary and important, but some of which were impossible, I'm sure, even emotionally for many of these men to take. And I think it's very difficult when we even look at the ravages upon marriage in our culture. There's very little support for that, isn't there? Okay? And what we see is we have to really go back and revisit, what does it mean to be married? What does it mean to be a priest? What is in my ability to carry out with God's grace, and what is outside of that? And the Lord says, in the context we're in, we have to remember this. In the context we're in, this is the time God has chosen us to exist. This is the time that God has brought us into this church. And this is our time. And we have to make sure that we do the best we can with it. And I think the Lord also always will promise us that if we discern His will and do His will, we will be happy. Not in the type of happiness we anticipated, which is fulfilling our desire, but in a type of happiness we never could anticipate. And this is what I've seen, particularly as a priest. There are relationships and circumstances that I'm drawn into that I would have said, I will only be miserable if that is going to be my life. I can honestly say, if I have to hang around with these people here, I know I'm going to be miserable. And if I have to do these things with them, I know I'll be even more miserable. I can honestly say that. But that the Lord has made me happier than when I chose the places and the persons I hung around with. It's amazing. I mean, and to me, that's the secret of Christ, which is he pulls you into relationships with people you never would have chosen yourself. But he says, I have chosen you, you have not chosen me. And he even chooses me through other persons. He says, I've chosen you through this person that you're uncomfortable with, because you will now learn my love from this person. Or you'll learn how to love this person even if they don't love you like me. But I've chosen you to bring us the relationship. And how many, can't you say that in your life, right? How often has it been that what you treasure and who you treasure the most are those you did not choose, but divine providence brought you that? And I think that's what's really beautiful, is to really see that. And very often even, we find that the most troublesome relationships are the ones we have chosen. I don't mean to say anything here, but you understand. And actually, it's by the devotion of saying, actually, I made this choice, Lord, help me to fulfill it. That is important. And that if you bend into that, what you see is, now I'm looking at this person differently. Now I'm seeing them with new eyes. Not the eyes of what I prefer, but the eyes of what you prefer for me. It's an entirely different way of seeing. And that shift is a beautiful shift. It's an important one to make. And people who advance in relationships have that shift where they say, I'm not going to look at this person the way my expectations were. I'm going to look at this person the way God sees them now. And that's an entirely different way of seeing. It's not a way of regret, but a way of newness and a way of a perception and love and truth in the present moment. That's what we want. So I'd ask your prayers for priests, and I'll pray for you, obviously, in your particular vocational paths. Let us stand as we will depart next week. I think it's the last week we'll gather. We'll have a big week and wrap up and do a summer mission. So let us pray in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And Mary, we turn to you as we pray together. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. The Lord be with you. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Go and announce the gospel of the Lord.